Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie B Cards, and in this video I want to discuss what I do and do not like about each of the top grading companies. There are four major sports card grading companies currently in the sports card landscape. There's a bunch of other fringe grading companies that are fantastic, but they are not to the top four level status yet. The top four are currently PSA, BGS, SGC, and CGC for sports cards, and I want to look at each of those companies, explain to you what I do and do not like about each of them. It might help you identify which one you want to try if you haven't sent any cards to any of them yet, or if you've only sent to maybe one or two of them, if the other grading companies could be a good opportunity for you. I also want to share what cards I send to these grading companies. I have sent cards to each of these companies, and I have cards of each of these companies in my personal collection, so I want to show those as well. But overall, let's just jump into this. The first one is PSA. What do I like about PSA? I like that they're very simplistic. Their slabs are straightforward, very simplistic design, simplistic case. The actual font is very straightforward. It says exactly what it's going to be. The grade is right here, Gem Mint 10 or PSA 9, a mint at 9. It actually shows you exactly what it is, and whether it's a 1 or whether it's a 10, it all looks the same. It's all concise. It's not necessarily calling out the grade consistently. It's just showing exactly what the facts are. That is one good thing about the PSA slab. On top of that, I'm not going to talk about value too much, but it's very obvious that PSA is the most valuable. If this was going to be a video about which was the most valuable, we could just say the most valuable is PSA. If you want to make the most money, send to PSA. Pretty straightforward. There may be some caveats like the BGS 10 Pristine Black label. We could look at the CGC 10 Perfect Pristine 10 or the SGC Pristine 10, whatever we want to do. We're not going to do that in this video, but that's one thing. PSA is very liquid. If you have a raw card or a PSA 9, even though they might be worth roughly the same value-wise, the PSA 9 is going to sell significantly easier than the raw card just because of the fact it's already established what the grade is. On top of that, their grading scale is extremely straightforward. It's one thing I do like about PSA. They have 1 through 10. They have a 9 that is a mint and a 10 that is a gem mint. Other companies like CGC and SGC, they have a pristine 10, a gem mint 10, they have a 9.5 mint plus and a 9 mint. So basically 4 grades that can kind of be around a PSA 10, while PSA just has the 10. Then we go to BGS, it gets even more complicated. We have a black label 10, a pristine 10, a BGS 9.5 gem mint, a 9 mint. There's a whole hierarchy with subgrades. So that's one thing PSA does right, is that they're very straightforward with their grading scale. They also have a damage/authenticity guarantee, meaning if a card was damaged in grading with them, they'll pay you the value of the card as long as you actually put it into the right submission and you actually have the right declared value of that card. And on top of that, they slab a card that is not actually real or is a counterfeit or something along those lines or altered. They usually reimburse you for that, which I like. They also have a digital grade reveal feature on their app where you actually can open the app when your order is finished. You can swipe and actually see what the card looks like with high resolution scans. And it's kind of like getting it in and looking in person, but it makes it really fun through the app, which I enjoy. And they have the largest and most in-depth pop report by far of all the major grading companies. What do I not like about PSA? Their slabs damage certain cards. The cards move around, and these little bumpers, they can damage the card. If you drop it or bump it or do anything along those lines, it can damage the cards. It's just the bumpers that I've seen damage cards, and I think they're trying to stop that, but that's one thing I don't love. I've had some very high-end cards that did have bumper damage, which is unfortunate. They are inconsistent with how they slab horizontal cards. That might not sound like a big deal, but it bothers me a ton. Sometimes they'll slab it like vertically this way, or they'll rotate it and flip it, and so like the name is on this side sometimes and this side sometimes, and it can be really annoying if you're trying to actually display a bunch of different horizontal cards and they're all flipped around backwards. So that's one thing I don't love. Not a big deal, a little bit nitpicky, but it's something I don't like. Sometimes they have inner sleeves for like Bowman Chrome autographs, and other times they don't. There's no really rhyme or reason to it, it feels like. It's just whoever graded it that day or encapsulated that day threw some in on this particular order, but not this one. So there's not a lot of consistency when it comes to that. It doesn't really make sense why they do that on some cards. And their turnaround times are generally the worst of all the major grading companies, maybe aside from BGS, because BGS has been pretty slow as well. That's one thing people don't like, particularly for specific sets. Like I have a dual grade and auto submission right now that's been in research and identification stage for like 2 months, and it's kind of getting to the point I want to call them to see what's up, but that's something that can be a little bit disappointing. They also have inconsistencies in graders. Not saying like in grades in one particular order, but sometimes you get a really lenient grader and other times you get a very strict grader. I have nothing to prove this, it's just my opinion, and those that grade often may or may not agree with me. They also have upcharges, meaning if you actually send a card card in a bulk submission that gets a PSA 10 and it's worth more than the declared value of $200, let's say it's worth $1,000, they're actually going to charge you for the insurance to actually cover sending that back to you, which can be frustrating. But the point of that, I believe, is to protect it with insurance on return shipping. That is something that is not great. It looks like you're paying for a grade. What would I grade with PSA? Anything. I would grade really anything with PSA, modern, ultra modern, vintage, PC cards, all the above, because they're very reputable of a company. The only thing I wouldn't really grade with them are thick cards, because a lot of times the thick cards don't look great in their slabs, but I think they've actually done better with that recently, but that's one thing I might send to other grading companies. Let's talk about BGS. BGS, what I like the label and design, right? I actually like their label a ton myself. I love the gold. I love the silver. I like the black label. They do a really good job, and it kind of feels like a metal. And, it looks really nice compared to just the plain red with PSA. I personally prefer that. That is complete preference, but that is what I like. I also like the Beckett 10 autograph token. This one's off center, which could drive some people crazy. I never noticed it until right now, but that's something that I do like as well. I actually like the protection of the inner sleeve. So this actually has a sleeve inside to protect from those bumper issues you see with PSA. It protects your card significantly better, in my opinion, compared to other grading companies. I also torture tested these, and these melt at a much higher temperature than the other slabs. And so these are really good about protecting your cards, which I like about BGS. The autograph grades look awesome. I already mentioned that. They also have subgrades. Some people love subgrades. Some people do not like subgrades, but you can see overall why a card graded a specific way right here on the slab with, again, PSA, SEC, CGC. They don't have that. And that means they're trying to be more transparent at BGS, which can be a good thing. They're also the best for thick cards, which I like. So like RPAs or, a big old patch card. BGS is a fantastic option because the cards look really well. The cases naturally are thicker, and so there's not as much of a difference between a thin card and a thick card compared to other grading companies. And the black labels are cool. They do have the opportunity to get a BGS 10 pristine or a black label, which look awesome, and they're worth quite a bit. What I dislike, their font and spacing inconsistencies. These fonts, these spacings, you can see again, this is off center. These are different from card to card. And there was like a scare with fake BGS cards a while back. We had no idea which were real and which were false because there were so many inconsistencies with these words and numbers and everything. So that's something I don't love, and I've never really liked that about their slabs. Subgrades. I know I said I like them, but I also dislike them. I think a lot of people prefer to enjoy being transparent and grading, but these subgrades can be really inconsistent. A lot of times you'll see people who will get a card, they'll crack it out, send it to BGS, and the subgrades change. They actually go up. Like you can say, well, they damaged the card. Of course, the subgrades are going to change. But like centering went from a 9.5 to a 10, or corners went from an 8.5 to a 9.5. And all those things can be quite frustrating because it's more visually obvious when there is an error. And on top of that, subgrades can also suck because if you have a gem mint card like this one here, people might not like it because there's a 9 surface grade, which BGS allows for the gem mint cards, and so does PSA technically. They just don't actually show that to you. But either way, it is showing that there, and some people don't like that. It can make it harder to sell the card. Their grading scale can be challenging because they do have a 9, a 9.5, a 10, pristine, and then a black label 10. So that can be confusing for people. And they're the least agile grading company, meaning they don't make changes very well. They don't implement changes very well. They'll sometimes show things and pull back versus just really kind of moving forward and being a market setter. They don't really do that very well. And they're the least transparent grading company with what's going on behind the scenes, while SGC Peter, who I believe is the CEO, is very good about showing what's happening. We'll talk about that in a moment. BGS does not do a good job of that. Also, you can see like the actual inner sleeve. The one negative is it does always have a glare on photos, which can be challenging to get a clean picture of the card. That is very nitpicky because I just said I liked that, and if I can have the inner sleeve and that means a little bit of a glare, I'm probably going to take that in most cases. What would I grade with them? I would grade in particular Bowman Chrome autographs like this Mookie Betts right here. I also like thick cards and thick patch autographs. Cards that look really, really good, I'd also grade with them if they only have like one issue. So like let's say there's a surface indent, but everything else was perfect. I can still get a decent grade if I got an 8 surface grade and everything else is a 9.5. That could get a 9 because surface actually can go up a whole bump as long as everything else is higher. So that's an example of sometimes you can get lucky with BGS in that way, and they can sometimes overgrade specific issues, which I like. SGC, let's talk about them real quick. What I like, they're great for vintage grading. It's plain and simple, they are one of the best. That is their niche. They've only recently become a favorite for modern sports card grading. In 2020, when the whole hobby slowed down with grading, they really got a niche. They actually didn't do great at first, but I will say they pivoted really well and expanded their company, and they did a good job of modern cards. But for me, I like their vintage grading and miniature card grading in particular. They have extremely good company transparency and turnaround times. That's one thing I love about SGC, is they're transparent about what they're doing. If they're behind a few days, they will make an announcement saying why they're behind, or they're very clear about their specials they're having, what they're doing, and I like that about them. They also do free autograph grades. So if this was autographed, they actually grade it for you as long as it's a 10. If it's not a 10, they will not grade it or put it on the slab, which I do like about them as well. What do I dislike? Their slabs feel cheap. They just feel a little cheap, and that's no disrespect to SGC. They're a great company. Some people don't like the black bordering as well that you can see. That's actually framing the card. Looks great on vintage, not always on modern cards, but their slabs are probably like the most flimsy and the easiest to crack out, and they just always chip a little bit more, is what I've noticed with at least my own cards. So their slabs sometimes feel a little bit lesser quality, which is my biggest turnoff to them right now. But overall, as a purely a company perspective, they're great. They do a great job, but that's one thing I don't love. Their slabs are also really tall and really wide. It can make it challenging to store them because, like, in my big case that I have, sometimes they can't close all the way because SGC cards are just taller than everything else. And I can show an example of that in a moment. And they're not great for crack out grading because a lot of times SGC, which I like about them, I should have put this in the likes, but I didn't, and I'll give this to them. They don't always say, like, if there's a couple surface scratches, but the rest of the card looks perfect and it presents really well, that can still get a 10 occasionally, or a 9.5 mint plus, right? And so sometimes you can crack it out, and PSA might be a stickler just purely based off of those small scratches, and they might give it an 8. Or a 9. But either way, that's one dislike. But overall, people have had extreme success stories with cracking out SGC. I just have not personally myself. Modern sports card grading is making less and less sense for SGC because PSA just makes more sense for value. And I think CGC makes sense for a PC presentation. I'll show that in a moment. But PSA, again, is kind of knocking everybody out when it comes to value with modern sports cards. It makes it difficult. What would I grade with them? I would absolutely grade vintage. I actually am going to be sending this Edgar Allan Poe from 1888 to them because it looks fantastic in their case, and SGC does a really great job of grading random cards along those lines, while PSA actually does not grade that particular card. That's the 1888 Dukes Poor Boys, that particular set, I believe. But overall, that's one thing I would grade with them, and I would grade some PC cards depending on how they would fit with this black border. Some would clash. If they look good, I would grade with that. Here's an example of how tall their slab is. Here is a CGC, here is a PSA, here's a BGS, and here is the SGC. You also can see here's a CGC. It's the exact same size as the PSA and a little bit taller than the BGS and slightly narrower than the BGS. But you can see the SGC is completely showing around the entire case, which is why it is quite a bit bigger. And the bulkier case, some people don't like, some people do like, but for me, it makes it a little bit tougher to store. So let's talk about CGC as my final grading company. What do I like about CGC? By far, without a shadow of a doubt, and I'll show a video of this on the screen, the slab clarity is the best with CGC. They display the cards so well, especially refractors. It's as if it wasn't even in a case. And that's one thing I like. PSA also does a pretty good job, and SGC can do a good job. BGS is by far the worst in that particular category because of that inner sleeve. You have to pick your battles again. But the slab clarity in the plastic by far is CGC. The slab feels good in your hands. It feels by far, for me, the most quality. If you haven't graded with them, I would recommend at least buying a cheap one online, seeing if you like it. And if you do, get one graded. And on top of that, they're primary graders in other collectible industries. They're like the primary grader in comic books. They're in the primary grader in currency with coins and money. Video games is where they're also primary grader. So they are here across other industries, which makes them, I think, going to be around much longer. I think they can actually go for that top spot compared to, SGC or even BGS at this point, because they have a lot of backing. They have a ton of money that's behind them, and they'll do what they want whenever they want to actually spend that money on marketing resources or whatever. At least that's my outside perspective. So that's one thing I do like about CGC. I think their future is bright in sports cards, even though they are relatively new in the sports card landscape. They've also changed their grading scale and their slab design. This used to be green, and they used to also work off of the BGS grading scale that was confusing, and now they work off of what SGC does, where the 9.5 is not the Gem Mint grade like BGS, it's the Mint Plus grade. Their Gem Mint is a 10, just like PSA and SGC. And so on top of that, they've changed it. I like that they changed it because they listened to the consumer and did that accordingly, which I like. They also have holograms built into the plastic case, not just this actual flip right here, the design of the slab. It's actually into the plastic, and it makes it much more difficult to actually counterfeit. And I spoke to them about that, which I think is really cool. And that's one thing that I think just shows quality on the back of the case. What do I dislike? Their market share is far behind other grading companies. Whenever I run polls about CGC or post a card about CGC, people say, why would you include them in this conversation? Or they say, why would you get that card graded with the CGC? And the truth is they're quickly growing to be one of my very favorite grading companies, especially for PC cards for display purposes. This Jose Ramirez was in an SGC slab. I got it into a CGC slab, and it does present significantly better with how clear it is. It's also clear all the way around, while PSA has the frosting, and that's a preference of mine. It's nice to see the clear all the way around. The label and grading changes have turned people off. The thing that I do like about them trying to satisfy the collectors has also made some collectors feel like they're just doing things to get like a money grab, which I also understand, but I do think it came from a good place as it's a new company coming into this industry, which is different than their other ones they're working in. They're trying to provide the best grading experience possible for you. They're not changing their scales truly, right? So a 9.5 Mint Plus would have been falling between their 9.5 Gem Mint or a 9 Mint, and that is showing how they're being more accurate with the scale and trying to do better for you. They also charge for autograph grades, which I don't love. I think it's $2 more per card. What would you grade with them? What would I grade with them? PC cards, plain and simple. If I have a card that's purely for the PC, I'm probably going to be sending it to them or PSA at this point. Refractors with good shine look amazing in these slabs, and that's what I recommend to grade with them, as mainly refractors because they look fantastic. So overall, those are the grading companies. Let me know in the comments below what you like and do not like about them, or if I missed some things about it overall. I want to point out, not really talking about value necessarily. There's good pros and cons about each of them. I like each of them, but overall, I just wanted to share my thoughts. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.